Don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified when new videos are posted. Enjoy the video. Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So, today I want to share a couple documentaries with you, my thoughts on a couple documentaries that I've watched recently. They're talking about the sixth extinction event, also known as the Holocene or Anthropocene extinction level event, which is something which some scientists claim is ongoing right now. That means there was 5 extinction events that happened before. The last one was 65 million years ago. 99% of all the species that have ever lived on this planet are now gone. There's only 1% left, and as many of you know, there is rapid decline in species on an ongoing basis, and some of that is certainly influenced by mankind. But then of course there are people who would claim that irrespective of mankind's being here or not, there are hundreds if not thousands of species that go extinct. I don't know the exact number every year. So the big debate revolves around how much of this is anthropogenic and how much of this is not caused by man. And these two documentaries take the approach, they're pretty hard line in terms of anthropogenic climate change. And the reason why I want you to watch them is, even it doesn't matter which side of the table you're on in terms of this climate change debate, it's good to be informed about both sides of the fence. And indeed, many of us have been exposed to the counter arguments to climate change. Some of them revolve around, well, looking at what is the profit motive. But one of these documentaries in particular, it's actually a lecture by a guy named Mcpherson, and he wrote a book called Nature Bats Last. And one of his observations is that mankind is not going to exist in 10 years from now. Obviously pretty alarmist. His views is that the situation is quite inexorable, and there's not much we can do about it. He basically says we're screwed. It doesn't matter what we try to do at this point. Runaway climate change is in effect. He says something interesting about people who often comment on how in the 70s there was a small group of scientists who thought that we were heading into another ice age. And he claims that it was only 20% of scientists who actually thought that we were moving into an ice age. So if that was factually correct, and only 20% were predicting the ice age, and now of course the overwhelming majority of scientists seem to agree that climate change is something which is man-made, which is happening, and of course there's a fraction of those people in that spectrum who believe that it's irreversible, that there's nothing we can do about it. So the point of this video is to just introduce these documentaries to you so that you can have a more well-rounded and informed opinion about these particular issues. Now, the other video I'm going to share with you was one that was done by Vice, and it was with a professor named Jeremy Rifkin, who's an economic theorist, and he's talking all about this thing called the Third Industrial Revolution, which is the new smart grid, using smart technology to mitigate some of these environmental issues. And of course, in doing so, the main criticism is going to be that this smart technology takes away from human beings' free will and autonomy, because as we move into this globalized smart technology based civilization, man is going to have to make some concessions to the greater good if we are to continue to live in the way we do. At least that's the argument that they're proposing. Now, some of you know I'm pretty agnostic on the issue of climate change. For one, it's a great way to ruffle the feathers of a lot of people on both sides. No matter which perspective you take, you're going to piss somebody off. Even as a moderate, I would receive a lot of flack for not being hardline in any one particular direction. There's people who want to convince you on either side of the fence, and that's fine that you have your opinions, and I encourage you to respectfully share them in the comments below, because indeed they may influence me in either direction. Now, I've watched a lot of the anti-climate change rhetoric, as much as I've watched some of the climate change rhetoric and some of the science that they've proposed. And what I've observed is that there is profit motives on both sides. Okay, there's money to be made in renewable energy, and there's money to be made, lots of money, by maintaining the current system. And who benefits from the current system? Well, it's the people in charge. So to say that there's no motivation on the part of industry to propagate the idea that climate change is not man-made is kind of foolish, because obviously there is. Now, of course, on the other side of that coin, people would say, well, yeah, but it's all about carbon taxation and Al Gore's different investment projects or different companies that he's invested in who are going to swoop in and save the day and get us all on clean, renewable energy. So there's certainly, two sides to that coin, but if we use the principle of parsimony, which is Occam's razor, and what is the simplest explanation? Well, it seems like the simplest explanation would be that the people who have all of the wealth right now and who own all the major industries right now, which are polluting the environment, it would seem that they would have more to gain in the here and now than this proposed carbon tax. Now, I'm not saying that the carbon tax is a good thing. I think it's dumb. I don't think it's a solution at all. I think it's purely just government's attempt to try to capitalize on an issue, right? So I don't necessarily think that that's the solution, but I don't think that just because there's a carbon tax, that means that nothing is happening and there's nothing to worry about, especially when you have scientists who are claiming that we are past the point of no return, such that even if 10% of what they're saying is right, and make no mistake, some of these guys believe that there's only 15 years left of civilization. So if that's the case, and even if they're off by 100 years, that's pretty significant. And I know some of them can come off as quite alarmist and maybe even misanthropic. I think a lot of people dislike the anti-human nature of some of these discussions. And of course that ties in to the whole conservative conspiratorial line, which says that human beings are a threat to the elites and they want to bring down the population and all the rest. It kind of coincides with that. But what I found is that conservatives and leftists or liberals, everybody's got a different name nowadays, socialists, whatever, they have two different reasons to prep primarily. People on the right tend to be prepping for man-made disasters, things like economic collapse, military conflict, electromagnetic pulse, and then you have a small subsection of those who are into the whole end times thing. So the stuff that is outside the scope of humanity's control, they attribute it to revelations and they attribute it to God. So they don't tend to believe that mankind is having a significant impact on the environment. Where if you move over to the left, people aren't too concerned about World War III. They're not overly concerned about economic collapse. In fact, there's a lot of people who would probably welcome the economic collapse, like this Jeremy Rifkin guy, who's talking about how, we need a whole new economy, the zeitgeist approach, the Venus Project type stuff. Anybody who's been around the internet for 10 years and on the conspiracy circuit knows what the Venus Project is. It's basically this proposition of a cashless, moneyless society where you don't own anything. That's kind of what they're pushing towards here, a system where you don't own a car, all cars are shared, and it's a system in which, if you need a ride somewhere, you jump in one of the shared cars and you go to that place, and then anybody else who might need it will jump in it, and etc. So you can kind of do that. It's all about a sharing economy as opposed to an ownership-based economy. And I have my criticisms of both of these, because there's parts of this discussion right here that make me cringe, and then there's also parts that I can say, yeah, I kind of agree with that. Anyways, I was talking about liberal motivation to prep tends to revolve around environmental issues. So leftists tend to go off-grid because they're worried about environmental collapse. People on the right tend to go off-grid because they're worried about the government, martial law, man-made disasters, or end times. Now, personally, I don't think the debate should necessarily revolve around the CO2 thing, as much as there's some compelling evidence to show that anthropogenic climate change exists. And I know I just triggered a whole crap load of people when I said that, and I'm just conveying to you what the consensus is right now. I'm not saying that I necessarily agree or disagree with it, but I'm saying that seems to be what the consensus is that anthropogenic climate change is a real thing, that if the ice continues to melt and the temperature continues to go up, methane is going to be released into the atmosphere, and we're all going to fry like chickens, and it's going to look like Mars in 100 years. That seems to be what the consensus is. I'm not saying I'm 100% agreement with that. But even if I wasn't, even if I totally disagreed with that perspective, there's certain things that the right and left do agree on. They agree that, for instance, nobody can dispute the fact that species are disappearing at an alarming rate, and that mankind does contribute to that significantly. Nobody can dispute the fact when you go on Google Earth and you look at a country like China or India or any very overpopulated region that we clearly are pushing nature to the fringes. Nobody can discount the pollution of our waterways and all of the various toxicities which are released by our civilization into the environment, which of course have negative health effects on us amongst every other part of the ecosystem out there. So there are lots of things that are undeniable in terms of our impact. It makes much more sense to focus on those things and try to mitigate those issues than to keep going with this debate about climate change, which, yes, I understand the seriousness of it. I understand that it has the potential to be the most significant of all ecological issues that we face, whether it's overfishing or deforestation. This CO2 thing, if it's what they say it is, then indeed it could lead to an extinction of the species. We cannot sustain a few centigrade increase in temperature. Some people say, yeah, we could build, different types of machines to help us survive that scenario. Others don't think it's that feasible. So what do you think? I want to know what you think in the comments, but go and check out these documentaries. Put them on when you're doing stuff around the house. That's what I tend to do. I'll be working on a project or something like that. I'll throw them on in the background because I like keeping myself stimulated and educated, even if it's something I disagree with. Now, there's one other documentary I'm going to link to. It's called The Overpopulation Myth, and it's a bit more positive. It talks about how, in spite of all of this doom and gloom type talk, that we're actually doing fairly well as a species and a planet. So it highlights all of the positive leaps that mankind has made in terms of increasing the quality of our lifestyles and whatnot. And of course, the myth of overpopulation, meaning that at around 9 billion, the population is supposed to level off because people in developed countries have less kids, and as all of the developed countries move up to the standard of living of Western society, they're going to start having less kids as well. It's a theory. If things keep going on this trajectory, it's probably true. Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check out CanadianPreparedness.com for many of your emergency preparedness needs. I can't say all your emergency preparedness needs yet because I'm not quite there, but we did recently bring in Mountain House food. Delicious stuff. Really post-collapse cuisine. So go check it out. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.